Welcome to Dark Past Dreams, where we slowly walk through the quiet, often messy details of medieval life. A world that might seem strange or even unpleasant to us now, but was home for millions for hundreds of years. The sun is just rising, casting a soft light over fields and forests nearby. Your house is simple. Wooden beams hold up walls made of wattle and daub, a mixture of sticks, mud, and straw plaster. The roof is thatched with reeds or straw, thick but leaking when rain comes. Picture waking up in a small medieval village. Your floor isn't wood or stone like modern homes. It's packed earth, sometimes covered with straw to keep the worst dirt away. The village streets are nothing like the clean, paved roads we know today. Instead, they are narrow paths of dirt, churned by hooves, carts, and feet. Smoke curls upward and escapes through a hole in the roof or a chimney. The fire provides heat and a place to cook. Meals are simple, coarse bread, vegetables from the garden, perhaps some salted meat if you are lucky. Light fades quickly after sunset, so work slows and the village quiets. After a rainstorm, the mud clings stubbornly to everything: your boots, the animals wandering nearby, even the legs of your wooden cart. Yet there was community, routine, and a connection to nature that shaped every moment. You might greet your neighbors as they fetch water from the village well or tend their small gardens. The day's work will be long, starting at dawn and ending at sunset. Cold seeps in through the thin walls and open cracks. Life here is communal. Everyone relies on one another for food, safety, and support. There's no glass in the windows, just wooden shutters that you open to let in fresh air. Outside, the first thing you notice is the mud. The smells are strong and not always pleasant. Villagers throw chamber pots out the windows. Animals roam freely, adding their own scents. Manure from horses, cows, and pigs piles up near the village edges or on the paths. The air carries a mix of smoke from cooking fires, damp earth, and these less agreeable odors. Yet this was home. Most villagers were peasants, farmers, and laborers, living simple lives shaped by the seasons and the land. The village itself is small, a cluster of homes surrounded by fields. Sometimes a small church or a lord's manor stands nearby. Inside your home, warmth comes from a small hearth. There's no running water. You carry water from the well or a nearby stream. This water is precious and used sparingly. The days follow the sun. Sleep comes early, often on straw-filled mattresses on the dirt floor. Life was hard. Mud made travel difficult. Illnesses spread easily. As you imagine these sights, sounds, and smells, let yourself drift slowly into the world of medieval people. A world where every day was a test of endurance and quiet strength. In the next section, we'll explore medieval hygiene and bathing, a surprisingly complex and sometimes smelly topic. We enter the curious world of medieval hygiene, a world far removed from modern showers and daily baths. Imagine a time when bathing was rare and sometimes feared. Many believed that washing too often opened the pores and made the body vulnerable to illness. For most medieval people, washing meant splashing water on the face and hands or rubbing the skin with a dry cloth. Perfumes and fragrant herbs were sometimes used to mask odors, especially among the wealthy. They were places for cleansing, but also associated with immoral behavior. During times of plague or illness, bathhouses were often closed to prevent disease spread. Public bathhouses existed in towns and cities, but had a mixed reputation. To fight them, they used herbal smokes, powders, or changed clothes often. In villages, bathing might happen once or twice a year, often in rivers or communal tubs. Indoor plumbing was unheard of. Instead, chamber pots were used at night and emptied outside. Still, hygiene standards were primitive by today's expectations. Many clothes were simply aired or beaten to remove dirt. Toilets were basic pits or latrines, often smelly and close to living spaces. Laundry was a major task. Clothes were washed infrequently, mostly in rivers or ponds. Soap was rare and expensive, made from animal fats and ashes. People coped with pests like lice and fleas, which were common and carried diseases. Hair was washed rarely. Hairstyles were practical. Men often kept short hair. Women covered their hair with veils or wimples. Combs were simple, often made of wood or bone. The wealthy might have more access to baths, scented oils, and perfumes. Despite these challenges, medieval people maintained routines that balanced comfort, health, and superstition. Imagine the smells of wood smoke, animal pens, unwashed bodies, and cooking fires mixing in the air. Life was full of earthy realities. These conditions made illnesses and parasites common, but people adapted and lived their lives. Next, we'll explore the medieval diet, what they ate, how they cooked, and what a typical meal looked like. Let's settle into the medieval kitchen, a place full of simple, hearty food shaped by the land and seasons. For most villagers, the diet was plain but sustaining. Bread was the staple, usually made from barley or rye, which grew well in poor soil. Wheat bread, lighter and softer, was a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Vegetables were grown in small garden plots. Common ones included onions, leeks, cabbage, beans, and peas. Root vegetables like turnips and carrots were also popular. Meat was scarce for peasants, eaten mostly on special occasions or by those who hunted. Fish was more common near rivers or coasts, often salted or smoked to preserve it. Food preservation was a constant concern. Bread was baked in communal ovens or small household hearths. Without refrigeration, methods like salting, smoking, drying, and pickling were essential to store food for winter. Cooking was done over open hearths. Large iron pots hung over the fire, simmering stews of grains, vegetables, and occasional meat. Water sources were often unsafe to drink, so ale and beer, low in alcohol but boiled during brewing, were common, even for children. Meals were eaten with hands or wooden spoons. Forks were not yet common in Europe. Knives were mostly for cutting bread or meat. Drinks were important too. Milk and cheese were part of the diet, especially for those who kept cows or goats. Meals were shared with family, often simple and repetitive. Festivals and religious holidays were welcome breaks, offering more abundant and varied food. Imagine the sights and smells of a medieval kitchen, the crackling fire, the aroma of cooking grains and herbs, the rough wooden table and simple bowls. Food was both survival and comfort in this hard world. As you imagine this, let the calm rhythms of medieval life carry you toward rest. Up next, the daily work that shaped the medieval world. We take a slow step into the rhythm of medieval work, a life measured by the rising and setting of the sun and shaped by the changing seasons. Imagine waking before dawn, the sky still dark, the air cool and quiet except for the faint sounds of animals stirring in nearby pens. Your day begins not with the buzz of alarms or digital screens, but with the first light, calling you to tend the fields, care for animals, and prepare food. For most medieval people, work was a constant and necessary part of life. The majority were peasants, tied to the land they farmed, often under the authority of a lord. You might be a serf, bound to a lord's estate, obligated to work his fields for part of the week in addition to your own small plot. The tools of the trade were simple but effective. Wooden plows pulled by oxen cut the soil, while sickles harvested grain. Your hands were rough, your clothes stained with earth and sweat. Winter slowed the pace, but it was often spent repairing tools, tending fires, or mending clothes. Work was never ending. Planting, weeding, watering, harvesting, each season had its own demands. Children helped from a young age, learning to care for animals or carry water. The village was alive with activity, smoke rising from chimneys, the clatter of carts, the voices of neighbors sharing news or gossip. Tradespeople like blacksmiths, weavers, and bakers also contributed to village life, each with their own hard work. Each day's work was a building block of survival and shared life. Despite the hardships, there was a deep connection to the land and community. Imagine the satisfying tiredness after a long day, your body heavy but your mind calm, ready for rest. The cycle of work and rest, hope and hardship, shaped the medieval world quietly but powerfully. In the next section, we'll explore the dangers that threaten life, illness, and war. We enter a shadowed part of medieval life, a world where danger was a constant companion. Disease and war cast long shadows over villages and cities alike. Imagine a time before antibiotics or vaccines, when illness was a mysterious and terrifying force. The most feared was the Black Death, a plague that swept through Europe in the 14th century, killing millions. It began with the fever, chills, and painful swellings called buboes. People didn't understand how it spread. Fleas on rats carried the plague, but superstition blamed many causes: bad air, sin, or divine punishment. Villages emptied, trade halted, and fear gripped the land. Doctors did their best with limited knowledge: bloodletting, herbal remedies, or charms. Hospitals were few and often run by religious orders. War was another ever-present threat. Lords fought for land and power. Battles could be sudden or drawn-out sieges. Imagine a village caught in the crossfire, people fleeing, homes burned, crops destroyed. Knights in armor clashed on muddy fields, swords ringing against shields. Travel was risky. Bandits preyed on merchants and pilgrims. Life was fragile and safety a precious luxury. Despite this, people persevered, finding strength in community, faith, and daily routines. Next, we'll step inside the stone walls of castles, places of refuge and conflict. Now, we cross the threshold into the imposing world of medieval castles, stone fortresses that rose above the landscape as symbols of power and protection. Imagine approaching a castle. Its towering walls loom above you, topped with battlements and guarded by archers. A wide moat encircles the stone walls, filled with murky water and crossed by a heavy wooden drawbridge. Castles were both homes and fortresses, places to live and defend. Inside the walls, the lord and his family lived in the keep, a tall stone tower. Rooms were cold and drafty, lit by flickering candles and fireplaces. Servants worked constantly, cooking meals over open fires, cleaning, tending animals. Guards stood watch day and night, ready to defend the castle from attack. Sieges were brutal affairs. Attackers tried to break through walls with battering rams or catapults. Defenders endured hunger, thirst, and fear. Knights, clad in heavy armor weighing over 50 pounds, trained for battle. Mounted on horses, they charged with swords and lances. Battlefields were chaotic and bloody, with the cries of the wounded filling the air. Castles were places of refuge, but also of danger. Inside, life was a balance of comfort and hardship, security and stress. As you imagine this, feel the cold stone walls and the tense quiet before battle. Next, we'll explore the central role of religion and the superstitions that filled medieval minds. Now we enter a world shaped by faith, where religion was woven deeply into the fabric of everyday life, and superstitions filled the spaces between understanding and mystery. Imagine a time when the church was not just a place to worship, but the center of social, political, and cultural life. For most medieval people, religion guided every moment, from the way they dressed and ate to how they understood health, fortune, and fate. The church wielded immense power. Bishops and priests influenced kings and common folk alike. Churches and cathedrals dominated village skylines with soaring spires and stained glass windows that told stories from the Bible. Mass was a daily ritual. People attended religious festivals, fasted during Lent, and sought forgiveness through confession. But alongside deep faith was a world of fear and superstition. Many believed in witches, demons, and spirits that could cause harm. Witch hunts were a grim reality. Accusations often stemmed from fear, misunderstanding, or personal grudges. People wore charms or amulets to protect themselves from evil. Pilgrimages to holy sites were both spiritual journeys and social adventures. Traveling long distances was perilous, but offered hope of healing or divine favor. The church also enforced orthodoxy through institutions like the Inquisition, seeking to root out heresy. Despite its power, the church was a source of comfort and community. Imagine the soft glow of candlelight in a quiet chapel, the murmured prayers, and the hope carried by faith. Next, we'll enter the curious world of medieval medicine, where science, magic, and superstition intertwined. We explore the strange and often bewildering world of medieval medicine, a mix of earnest effort, limited knowledge, and deep superstition. Imagine a world without modern hospitals, antibiotics, or even a true understanding of germs. Illness was a mystery. Causes were often attributed to imbalances of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Doctors and Berber surgeons offered treatments like bloodletting, where they would drain blood to balance the body. Herbs like garlic, rosemary, and chamomile were used for their supposed healing properties. Cupping, where heated glass cups were placed on the skin to draw out illness, was common. Surgery was rare and painful, often performed without anesthesia. Many remedies were mixed with religious rituals or charms, reflecting the intertwining of faith and medicine. Hospitals were few, mostly run by monks and nuns who cared for the sick and poor. Midwives helped women through the dangerous process of childbirth using traditional knowledge. Despite the limitations, medieval medicine laid foundations for future advances. Imagine the quiet patience of healers working by candlelight, hoping their potions and prayers bring relief. Next, we'll meet some of the famous figures and key events that shaped medieval history. We meet the giants of medieval history, the kings, queens, knights, and battles that have echoed through time. Imagine a world ruled by monarchs like Charlemagne, who united much of Europe, or William the Conqueror, who changed England forever in 1066. Kings wielded immense power but faced challenges from nobles, the church, and rival states. Queens and noblewomen managed estates and influenced politics, though their power was often limited. Knights were the elite warriors, bound by codes of chivalry and honor. Famous battles like the Crusades sent armies across continents, blending faith, politics, and warfare. Events like the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215 began shaping ideas of law and rights. Medieval history is a tapestry of conflict, alliance, ambition, and culture. As you imagine these stories, picture the banners fluttering, the clang of swords, and the whispered plots in castle halls. Next, we'll explore the fall of the medieval period and the dawn of new times. We journey into the twilight of the medieval world, a time when centuries-old traditions began to shift and change, paving the way for a new era. Imagine a world still ruled by kings and nobles, but where old structures were creaking under new pressures. The Black Death had struck hard, drastically reducing populations and shaking the foundations of feudal society. With fewer peasants to work the land, some found themselves with new freedoms and bargaining power. Trade in cities grew as merchants and craftsmen gained influence. New ideas flowed along trade routes, bringing knowledge from distant lands. The Renaissance, a rebirth of art, science, and learning, began to spread. Technology changed warfare and daily life. The invention of the printing press allowed ideas to spread faster than ever before. Gunpowder altered battlefields, making castles less impregnable. Amidst these changes, medieval society slowly gave way to modern Europe. The old world lingered, but a new world was on the horizon. Next, we'll uncover some of the odd and fascinating fun facts and creepy myths from the Middle Ages. We explore some of the strangest, quirkiest, and sometimes downright creepy tales from the Middle Ages. Imagine stories told by firelight, filled with dragons, witches, and mysterious creatures lurking in dark forests. People believed in all manner of strange things, from werewolves to ghosts in enchanted forests. Odd laws existed too, like regulations on the length of men's beards or the colors certain classes could wear. Some festivals involved bizarre customs, like dancing around poles or pretending to be animals. These myths and customs gave color and mystery to medieval life, reflecting hopes, fears, and the imagination of the times. Next, we'll escape to medieval festivals and entertainment, moments of joy amid hardship. We step into the bright, lively world of medieval festivals, brief respites of joy and community in a hard-working life. Imagine village squares filled with music, dancing, and colorful costumes. Jesters and minstrels performed tricks and songs, bringing laughter to the crowd. Feasts featured roasted meats, fresh bread, and sweet pies. Games like archery contests and jousts thrilled spectators. Seasonal festivals celebrated harvests, saints' days, and holy times. For a few hours or days, the worries of work and war faded, replaced by celebration and connection. Next, we'll explore medieval fashion, what people really wore in this fascinating era. We unravel the fabric of medieval fashion, what people actually wore, beyond the tailies of velvet robes and shining armor. For most medieval folk, clothing was practical, meant to protect against the elements and hard labor. Common materials included wool, linen, and occasionally hemp. Clothes were often homemade, dyed with natural colors extracted from plants, roots, or insects. Peasants wore simple tunics or dresses, often in muted earth tones. Layers were important for warmth, woolen cloaks in winter, lighter garments in summer. Shoes were sturdy but plain, made of leather and designed for walking long distances in muddy fields. Nobles, by contrast, displayed their status through richer fabrics, brighter colors, and elaborate designs. Silks and velvets adorned the wealthy, along with furs and jewelry. Sumptuary laws sometimes regulated who could wear what, tying fashion to social class. Headwear was important. Men might wear simple caps or hoods, while women covered their hair with veils or wimples. Hairstyles varied, but long hair was common among women, often braided or pinned. Clothing was often repaired and passed down, prized possessions in a world where fabric was precious. Imagine the textures: rough wool, smooth linen, the scratch of fur, and the colors fading under the sun. Fashion reflected more than style. It revealed the social order and the rhythms of medieval life. We enter the quiet halls of medieval learning, where knowledge was rare, precious, and often guarded. Most people in medieval Europe were illiterate, relying on oral tradition to pass stories and skills. Monks in monasteries preserved ancient texts, painstakingly copying manuscripts by hand. Education was primarily the domain of the church. Cathedral schools and early universities began to emerge in the 12th and 13th centuries, teaching theology, philosophy, and the liberal arts. Students learned Latin, the language of scholarship. Books were rare and costly, handwritten on parchment or vellum, richly decorated and treasured. For peasants and townsfolk, education meant apprenticeships, learning trades through hands-on experience. Imagine the dim candlelight illuminating scribes writing by quill, the scent of parchment and ink filling the air. Knowledge was a treasure slowly growing, paving the way for the Renaissance. Welcome back, travelers. As we draw our journey through medieval times to a close, let's reflect on the legacy this era left behind. The Middle Ages shaped much of the modern world, our laws, languages, architecture, and even holidays. Castles and cathedrals still stand, silent witnesses to centuries past. Medieval stories inspire books, films, and games, keeping alive the spirit of knights, kings, and mysteries. The social structures evolved but left traces in today's customs and institutions. Though often seen as dark or backward, the Middle Ages were a time of resilience, creativity, and profound change. As you drift into sleep, let the quiet echoes of this ancient world lull you, reminding us that even in the harshest times, life goes on, quietly weaving the fabric of history. Good night, travelers.